Welcome back to Labari Studio, where every week we dig up the untold histories of Africa, the queens, kings, warriors, and kingdoms that got left out of the textbooks, and bring them back into the light. Colonial court records called her a witch doctor and charged her with murder. What they were actually describing, whether they realized it or not, was one of the most powerful religious and political authorities in Shona society. A woman whose word could mobilize an entire uprising against an empire. A woman whose execution in 1898 turned into a prophecy that outlived the colony that carried it out. Her name was Nehanda Charwe Nyakasikana, known to her people as Mbuya Nehanda. And nearly 80 years after the British hanged her, guerrilla fighters went to war against that exact same colonial system, chanting her name. Quick gut check before we continue. Comment below if witch doctor is what you'd have believed too. Be honest, no judgments here. To actually understand Nehanda's authority, you have to set the dismissive colonial label aside completely. In Shona religious and political tradition, Mhondoro were powerful ancestral spirits, often tied to the founding lineages of the land itself, and specific living people served as their mediums, channeling their guidance on everything from farming decisions to matters of war and governance. This wasn't some fringe belief hanging out on the edge of society. Mhondoro mediums functioned as a parallel structure of real authority alongside chiefs, consulted on major decisions the exact same way a council or a court might be consulted anywhere else. Nehanda was the medium of one of the most significant Mhondoro spirits in Mashonaland, based in the Mazoe Valley in what's now northern Zimbabwe. So when the British South Africa Company, Cecil Rhodes' chartered colonial enterprise, moved into Mashonaland in the early 1890s, it wasn't just grabbing land and slapping on taxes and forced labor. It was colliding head-on with an existing system of religious and political authority that had run the region for generations. And Nehanda's position sat right at the center of it. The British South Africa Company's rule in Mashonaland in the 1890s was brutal by almost any measure. Forced labor demands that pulled men off their own farms, punitive taxation, cattle confiscation on a massive scale, especially devastating during the rinderpest epidemic that was already wiping out herds across the region. Land seizures that displaced entire communities from territory their families had held for generations. Add in a severe drought and locust plagues hitting during the same years, and by 1896, conditions across Mashonaland and Matabeleland were already at a breaking point before a single shot got fired. In March 1896, a coordinated uprising against British colonial rule broke out, first among the Ndebele in Matabeleland, then spreading into Mashonaland, in what became known as the First Chimurenga, the First Great War of Resistance. This wasn't some spontaneous riot. In Mashonaland specifically, the uprising was organized and religiously sanctioned through the Mhondoro system, and Nehanda, working alongside another prominent medium, Kaguvi and Mukwati, a priest connected to the Mwari religious shrine network, used that spiritual authority to help mobilize fighters across a huge stretch of territory. For the British, this made the uprising brutally hard to suppress through normal means, because it wasn't organized around one military chief they could hunt down and defeat. It ran through a religious authority structure that commanded loyalty independent of any single battlefield outcome. You couldn't win one battle and expect the resistance to end, because the resistance wasn't rooted in a battlefield in the first place. It was rooted in belief. Comment below if you think that's actually the hardest kind of resistance to put down. One that doesn't run through a single commander you can capture, but through something an army can't touch at all. The uprising eventually got crushed by British reinforcements over the course of 1896 and 1897 through military force, and in some documented cases, by deliberately targeting religious leaders to break the uprising's organizing structure at its source. Nehanda was captured in December 1897. She was tried under British colonial law and specifically charged with the killing of a local native commissioner, Henry Pollard, during the uprising, based on testimony that she'd ordered his death. She was found guilty, sentenced to death, and executed by hanging in 1898, alongside Kagubi, who was captured and executed around the same time. Accounts describe her walking to her own execution defiantly, and one detail has been repeated across generations of Zimbabwean oral history and later written accounts. Right before she died, she told the British her body would rise again, that this fight was not finished. And here's the part of Nehanda's story that turns it from a straightforward tragedy into something else entirely. Her name didn't stay buried with her. Nearly 70 years after her execution, when Zimbabwean nationalist movements launched the Second Chimurenga, the guerrilla war of the 1960s and 70s that eventually ended white minority rule and led to Zimbabwe's independence in 1980, fighters explicitly invoked Nehanda's name and legacy as a direct spiritual and political line connecting their war to hers. The country that came out of that war took the name Zimbabwe itself, deliberately reclaiming the name of the ancient stone city and civilization colonial historians had spent decades insisting Africans couldn't have built. That's a whole episode on its own, and we're saving it for later in this run. Nehanda's prophecy that her spirit would rise again became, in the most literal political sense, possible and true. In 2021, a statue of Mbuya Nehanda went up in Harare, formally recognizing what oral tradition had insisted on for generations, long before any government was willing to actually put it in bronze. Comment she rose, if a 70-year-old prophecy actually coming true, in bronze, in the middle of a capital city, gives you chills the way it gives me chills. So why did the colonial court describe her the way it did? Why witch doctor instead of religious and political leader? The colonial court that tried Nehanda used language built specifically to strip her of legitimate authority, treating her as a superstitious curiosity instead of what she actually was, a recognized religious leader whose authority ran through an established functioning system of governance that predated British arrival by generations. That framing wasn't just condescending, it was strategic. Reducing Nehanda to a witch doctor in the official record made it a lot easier to justify her execution as a simple criminal matter instead of what it actually was, killing a political and spiritual leader for organizing resistance to colonial rule. What would that framing have cost if it had actually stuck the way the British wanted it to? A precedent erased, proof erased, proof that Shona governance had its own legitimate functioning structures of authority, sophisticated enough to organize a coordinated multi-region uprising against a colonial power without a single centralized military command. If the witch doctor label had stuck permanently, an entire system of indigenous governance would have gotten reduced to superstition in the historical record, and the resistance itself would have been remembered as chaos instead of what it actually was. Organized, deliberate, and dangerous enough that the British had to target its religious leadership directly just to break it. Thankfully, it didn't stick. Zimbabwean oral history never accepted that framing, not for a single generation, and that's exactly why her name survived intact enough to be picked back up by an entirely new generation of fighters, 2/3 of a century later. So who was Nehanda really? the medium of one of the most significant ancestral spirits in Shona tradition, a position of real structural religious and political authority. An organizer whose spiritual standing helped mobilize a coordinated uprising across an entire region. A prisoner who faced a colonial court determined to strip her of legitimacy and who was executed for it anyway, on charges shaped by that same determination. And a prophet whose final words became, decades later, a literal description of what actually happened to her country. Why does this matter now? Because Nehanda was hanged as a criminal by a colonial court that needed her authority to look like superstition, and her own people never stopped calling her what she actually was. When Zimbabwe finally won its independence, it did so under a name and a spirit she'd already given her life defending, generations before anyone else was ready to fight that exact same fight. Reclaiming her story means using her full title, Mbuya Nehanda, not the label the court gave her. It means teaching the Mhondoro system as real governance, not folklore. And it means understanding that colonial courts didn't just execute resistance leaders. They tried to rewrite what kind of leader they'd executed, and every single time we say her name correctly, that rewrite fails a little bit more. Thank you for watching. If this one felt different, hit subscribe. We drop new episodes every week about the African men and women whose power shaped history. Next up, we're heading to Yorubaland, centuries earlier, for a story that survives in oral tradition rather than court documents. A queen who infiltrated an enemy camp to save her city from a terrifying army, and paid a price for that victory that still makes this one of the most heartbreaking stories in West African legend. We'll see you in Ileife.